I told them I was pregnant on a Monday. By Friday, I was fired. No warning, no hesitation. Restructuring, they said. Just corporate jargon to mask the truth. They were getting rid of a woman who was about to become a mother. I walked out of the company I dedicated 3 years of my life to, pregnant, jobless, and burning with fury. He thought I'd disappear quietly. What he forgot was that I had been the direct contact for 3 of our biggest clients. 6 months later, I launched my own firm, signed $4.7 million worth of contracts, and took back all 3 accounts. The day he realized the new CEO his former clients had chosen was me, his face turned ghost white, right in the middle of a packed industry conference. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happened after I walked out that Friday with nothing but a cardboard box and a plan to burn everything down and rebuild it under my name. My name is Madison Rivera, 31, based in Dallas, Texas. Before everything imploded, I was an account manager at Nixon & Ward, a mid-sized branding agency working with beverage, athleisure, and e-commerce clients. I was good, not perfect, but undeniably valuable. I believed hard work made me irreplaceable. I believed in merit. But that Friday shattered everything I thought I knew. To someone like Paul Nixon, a pregnant woman wasn't an asset. She was a liability. The termination meeting was short. Paul sat beside HR Director Vanessa, pretending it wasn't personal. He said, "We're restructuring. Your role is being phased out." Vanessa avoided eye contact as she slid an envelope across the table, an exit agreement with a paltry payout. I signed. What choice did I have? But in that moment, something inside me broke loose. And it didn't die. It sharpened. I didn't cry the next day. I didn't wallow. I opened my laptop and did what I do best: research, strategy, planning. I created a spreadsheet with every client I'd ever managed: budget history, campaign notes, personal insights. I opened a blank tab and typed the header, Madison Rivera, Rebuild Plan. Pregnancy made me unemployable in their eyes, but I had something they didn't: trust from the clients they no longer understood. That night, lying in bed, I felt the baby stir. I whispered, "We're starting over, sweetheart. This time, on our own terms." Then I made the calls. Not desperate, not begging, just one question. If I built a lean, agile agency, one that prioritized you, your voice, your vision, would you leave Nixon & Ward? Val & Spirits responded within the hour. "If you're in, we're in. We signed with them because of you, not the logo on the door." Corfit Apparel. "Girl, we're dying over there. Nixon doesn't listen. You leave, we leave." I called Alyssa, my college roommate turned freelance designer. "I've got leads. You want in?" We were in business. That first contract, just $15,000 for a local protein bar company, was small, but it had my name on it, my agency. I named it Rise & Co. Rise because I had fallen. Now I would rise. Meanwhile, Paul Nixon carried on like nothing happened, still schmoozing with clients, still coasting on other people's work. What he didn't realize was this: every major pitch Nixon & Ward won in the past 2 years had my fingerprints on it. In month 3, I heard Val & Spirits had canceled their contract. Loss of trust in the account team, they'd said. I just smiled. I had already signed them 2 weeks earlier. We just hadn't announced it yet. Month 4, I leased a small loft office overlooking the Dart line. My first 3 hires, all ex-Nixon employees who quit voluntarily to join me. This wasn't revenge. It was a restructuring. Mine. By month 6, at the Texas Branding Forum, Paul Nixon was up on stage droning about client experience innovation. Midway through the panel, the MC interrupted. "We're thrilled to welcome a rising voice in our industry. Please give a warm round of applause to Madison Rivera, CEO of Rise & Co., a boutique firm making waves after securing 3 major accounts in under half a year." I stepped onto the stage in a fitted black dress, hair swept up, makeup subtle, belly flat. I looked him straight in the eye. His face turned pale. I smiled. "Hello, Paul. Long time no see."
He didn't speak. He couldn't. The color had drained from Paul's face so completely that for a split second, I thought he might faint right there on stage. I stood just a few feet from him, microphone in hand, heart steady. I wasn't here to humiliate him. I was here because I belonged. The moderator turned to me with a practiced smile. "Ms. Rivera, Rise & Co. has had a rather impressive first 6 months. What would you say is the core value behind your rapid growth?" I didn't hesitate. Truth, accountability, and not underestimating women. The room went quiet, then erupted in applause. Paul chuckled nervously, adjusting his blazer. "We've all underestimated a good idea once or twice, haven't we?" he said, trying to recover. I turned to him, smiling. Some more than others. The rest of the panel was a blur of half-hearted questions and buzzword-filled commentary. But I wasn't there for the discussion. I was there to send a message. I'm not just back. I've built something better. After the panel, as attendees gathered for cocktails and schmoozing, I noticed Paul lingering near the bar, talking to a marketing director from Loom Lighting, their last remaining premium client. He caught me watching and quickly looked away. Good. Let him wait. As I made my way to the exit, someone grabbed my elbow, gently. It was Maya, my former junior account assistant, someone I trained for 2 years before I was fired. "Maddie, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I gave her a hug. "You're still at Nixon?" "For now, but honestly, it's falling apart. Clients keep asking for you. Paul acts like it's business as usual, but he's losing control. It's kind of poetic." I smiled, but said nothing. I didn't need to gloat. Nixon and Ward was on a slow decline, and I hadn't even done my real damage yet. The next morning, I woke up early, did yoga, and made myself a smoothie while emails rolled in. 2 new client inquiries, 1 potential collaboration with a West Coast branding firm, and a message from Ben Tran, the CFO of Valen Spirits. We've decided to expand our contract to include full digital. Let's discuss Monday. Another win. Another reminder. This wasn't luck. This was strategy. While Nixon had always treated his clients like transactions, I had built real relationships. I knew their kids' names, their launch anniversaries, what flavors of bourbon their CEOs liked, and what platforms they were secretly embarrassed about not understanding. I had never planned on going independent, but now I couldn't imagine giving that freedom back. I hadn't told many people what really happened the week I got fired, but now, with the firm growing, I found myself ready to say it out loud. It started with a calendar invite. "Madison, touch base with HR Friday at 10 a.m. No subject line, no explanation. When I walked into the HR office that Friday morning, Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Paul didn't even bother to show up in person. He called in via Zoom. His square on the screen was dark. "We appreciate your service, Madison, But we're undergoing changes, and unfortunately, your role is no longer aligned with our structure. Is this because I'm pregnant? I asked. Vanessa flinched. Paul laughed. Of course not. That would be discrimination. This is purely a structural decision. A structural decision that just happened to target the only pregnant employee at the firm. I didn't fight it then, not because I wasn't angry, but because I knew how people like Paul worked. He'd been subtle about his advances for years, booking accidentally shared hotel rooms during business trips, making offhand comments about how motherhood slows women down, suggesting I'd take a few years off after I started showing. I wasn't about to argue with someone who'd already decided to erase me. So I left. But I took everything I built with me. I still remember sitting in that first rented office space, just me, a rickety desk, a secondhand espresso machine, and a vision. My belly was growing by the week, and my budget was laughably small, but my phone never stopped buzzing. Clients trusted me, and I kept delivering. That first campaign for Corfit, a viral success. We sold out their limited edition drop in 3 days. The rebrand for Valen, picked up by Adweek. The micro campaign for a new eco skincare line. It got them 50,000 new followers in 6 weeks. Nixon never saw it coming. He thought he could replace me with someone younger, more flexible. The new girl? She didn't last 2 months. Clients wouldn't even return her calls. By the time Rise & Co. hit $1 million in revenue, I'd already outpaced Nixon and Ward's entire Q2 growth, and I wasn't even done building. But the moment that really sealed it? Client Showcase Night. Every year, the Dallas marketing world gathered for a showcase of top agencies and their portfolio wins. I'd never been invited before, not as Nixon's employee, but this year I was invited as a speaker. As I walked onto the main stage, I saw Paul seated near the back, trying to blend into the shadows. I introduced a case study on Corfit's Gen Z pivot and watched as his jaw tensed when the room applauded. A few people glanced at him knowingly. After the presentation, a Loom lighting exec approached me. We've been with Nixon for 8 years, but honestly, your vision makes more sense. I think it's time for something new. I just nodded. Let's talk Monday. By the time I reached the parking garage that night, I checked my phone and smiled. Ben from Valen Spirits had just sent another message. We'd like you to meet with our West Coast distributor next week. Potential expansion. Bring your best deck. I leaned against my car, closed my eyes, and took a long breath. 6 months ago, I left a job with nothing but a box of office supplies, a belly full of baby, and 1,000 invisible wounds. Now they were all watching me rise.
I gave birth on a Wednesday morning in late spring. Rain tapped gently against the hospital window as I held my son for the first time, his fingers no larger than matchsticks, his breath warm against my chest. The world slowed. The revenge, the clients, the strategy, all of it faded for that one sacred moment. But I knew, even then, that the world wouldn't wait. Emails were already piling up. My phone buzzed every hour. There were campaigns in motion, meetings being scheduled, decisions only I could make. Rise & Co. was barely 7 months old, and it was already too big to pause. So, I didn't. I took 2 weeks. Just 2. And on day 15, I was back. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because the empire I was building wasn't just for me anymore. My first day back, I nursed Leo in the morning, handed him to my sister, who had flown in from Chicago to help, slipped on a navy wrap dress, and walked into my office like I had never left. The space was different now. The couch had a soft blanket draped across it. A mini fridge in the corner held bottles, both baby formula and rosé. My desk had a framed photo of Leo and me, tucked next to a crystal award from the Texas Women in Marketing Association, Rising Agency of the Year, a gift from the board, and an apology from the world. But victory doesn't come without resistance. By month 8, Nixon and Ward began bleeding staff. 2 of their top designers left, 1 joined me. A strategist emailed me privately. "You built what we all wished Nixon had the courage to be. If there's ever an opening, I'm ready." Clients were following the same pattern. Whispered messages, quick lunches. "Can we talk off the record?" It was a slow exodus, one Paul couldn't explain to his board. He tried to fight back, of course. He released press statements bragging about new leadership, hosted free webinars, launched a campaign that tried to mimic our Valen Spirits concept, almost down to the color palette. It tanked, because people know the real thing when they see it. One Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected message from an old contact, Laura Cho, former director of partnerships at Helix Travel. She and I had worked together briefly on a campaign that went viral 2 years ago. She had always been sharp, fair, and blunt to a fault. Her email subject line read, "We need to talk, privately." I clicked. She wrote, "Paul's pitching us again. He mentioned you. Badly. Said Rise & Co. was a cute maternity side project. Thought you'd want to know. Also, would love to discuss something more serious. Are you available tomorrow at 10? I stared at the screen. A cute maternity side project? I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and felt the heat rise up the back of my neck. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I had built a 7-figure agency in under a year while growing a human being inside me. And now, he wanted to reduce all of that to a joke. He still hadn't learned. The next morning at 10 a.m. sharp, I walked into a quiet conference room at the Helix Travel HQ. Laura stood up, hugged me, then gestured to the man beside her. "This is Blake, our new chief brand officer. He's heard a lot about you." Blake smiled, extended a hand, "And I've seen the work. I'm especially impressed by your CoreFit social integrations. We'd like to talk exclusivity." I blinked. "You mean exclusive agency of record?" "Yes, multi-year, full scope. Strategy, creative, media, digital." My chest tightened. This wasn't just a contract. It was a declaration. If I landed this, Rise & Co. would officially eclipse Nixon and Ward on every major metric. "And Paul?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Blake smirked. "We've already told him we're not moving forward. Laura thought you'd appreciate hearing it directly." I did. And I wasn't done. The next week, I finalized the Helix contract. $2.3 million in its first year, with a 2-year renewal clause. I onboarded 3 new team members, expanded our office space into the unit next door, and hired a dedicated operations director to streamline our growth. I celebrated with takeout Thai food, barefoot on my office floor, Leo in a bassinet beside me, his tiny hand wrapped around my index finger. This was the life they tried to deny me. Then came the email from Paul Nixon himself. Subject: Coffee? I read it twice. He wrote, "I hear you've made quite a name for yourself. Impressive work. Wondering if we could sit down sometime. Just talk. Catch up. No agenda." No agenda, please. I clicked reply. "Appreciate the note. I don't take meetings without an agenda. Feel free to send a calendar invite with purpose." I never heard back. But word got around. By the end of the quarter, Rise & Co. had overtaken Nixon & Ward in market share within the Dallas creative space. Agencies started reaching out to collaborate. Founders of startups I'd never met sent me flowers with notes that read, "You're changing the rules. Thank you." And late one night, while rocking Leo to sleep, I opened an email from Forbes Women asking if I'd be willing to do an interview. They wanted to title the piece, "The Woman Who Got Fired for Being Pregnant, Then Outgrew Her Boss." I smiled, kissed Leo's forehead, and typed back, "Only if you let me write the ending." Because the ending wasn't about revenge. It was about rebirth.
2 weeks after the Forbes article dropped, I walked into the Rise & Co. office to find a dozen white tulip arrangements on my desk and a line of emails titled simply, "We read your story." The piece had gone viral, not just in marketing circles, but across the broader landscape of working women, entrepreneurs, and corporate whistleblowers. The comment section was a tidal wave of reactions. She turned a pink slip into a power move. This is why you never underestimate a woman with a baby and a plan. I just sent this to my HR manager and said, "Be warned." But it wasn't the applause that hit hardest. It was the quiet messages from women in finance, law, architecture, from nurses, waitresses, freelance writers, from a military spouse who got let go from her job while her husband was deployed, from a 19-year-old barista who said she printed out the article and taped it next to her espresso machine as a reminder. You don't have to swallow their silence forever. I sat at my desk, reading each one. Some I cried through. Some made me laugh. One made me physically shake. It read, "My boss asked me how long I plan to be useful now that I'm 12 weeks along. I haven't told anyone until now. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not crazy and that I'm not done." I replied instantly, "You're not done. You're just starting." That afternoon, while Leo slept in his bassinet in the corner of my office, I opened my notebook and wrote at the top of a clean page, Phase 2, Build It Bigger. Because Rise & Co. had survived the fire, now it was time to grow beyond it. I didn't want to just beat Nixon & Ward. That chapter was already closing. I wanted to redesign the playing field, one where women didn't have to choose between ambition and motherhood, between boldness and belonging. The next month, I announced Rise for Her, an internal mentorship and partnership initiative that would match newly pregnant creatives with senior professionals for paid coaching, legal navigation, and post-maternity transition support. Within 48 hours, my inbox flooded. Designers from Atlanta, media buyers in Portland, copywriters in New York, all saying the same thing. Where has this been? We matched our first 12 pairs by the end of the week. Meanwhile, Nixon & Ward continued their spiral. A mutual acquaintance forwarded me a LinkedIn post from Paul. After 18 incredible years building Nixon & Ward into a trusted name in marketing, I've decided to take a step back and explore new ventures. Thank you to everyone who's been part of the journey. Translation: he was pushed out. The board had seen the exodus, the revenue drop, the headlines, and made their move. Paul was no longer CEO. The post ended with a generic, "I'm available for consulting" pitch. I didn't comment, I didn't forward it, I just smiled quietly and closed the tab. Some victories didn't need a speech, just silence. One did. About 2 months after Leo turned 1, I was walking through the conference room after a long shoot when I heard someone behind me say, "Excuse me, Miss Rivera." I turned. A young woman, early 20s, tight ponytail, nervous energy, stood holding a branded Rise & Co. folder. "I'm Naomi," she said, extending a hand. "I just started as an intern. I wanted to say thank you." I raised an eyebrow, smiling. Thank you? She flushed. Sorry, I mean just the story, the company, the fact that you exist. I laughed. Well, I'm glad I do too. How's your first week? She glanced around the modern glass-walled space with rows of mood boards and whiteboards filled with scribbles. Honestly, it's the first place I've been where no one looks surprised when I have ideas. That hit me deep. Then we're doing something right, I said, and I expect big things from you. Naomi nodded, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. She took a breath. If they hadn't fired you, do you think you'd still be there? The question stunned me more than I expected. Would I? I looked out the window. Leo's daycare photo was pinned on the corkboard beside a note from my head of strategy. You didn't just build a company, you built oxygen. And I realized they had freed me by underestimating me. I think, I said slowly, I would have stayed longer than I should have, and I would have played smaller than I was born to. Naomi's eyes widened. Damn. I smiled. Exactly. The following week, we hosted our first Women Who Rise event, an invite-only gathering for creative professionals navigating motherhood, career pivots, discrimination, and ambition. We didn't call it a panel. It wasn't a conference. It was a reclamation. No suits, no scripts, just couches, drinks, music, and one microphone that got passed around as women told their stories. One woman said her CMO told her, "We assumed you'd lose interest in work once the baby came." Another shared how she got demoted 2 days after returning from maternity leave to give you time to adjust. I stood up last, not to lecture, just to say what I wish someone had told me on that awful Friday I was fired. They will try to shrink you, to define you, to dismiss you. Let them, because you're not building a seat at their table. You're building your own damn building. The room went quiet. Then the applause came. And afterwards, a woman from a major brand came up to me and whispered, "Would you ever consider acquiring an agency?" I looked at her, heartbeat steady. Why don't we grab a drink and talk? Because this wasn't the end. It was the start of the next phase. By the time we sat down for that drink, I already knew the answer. Yes, I was ready to acquire. Her name was Janine Roth, founder of a boutique creative studio in Austin. She'd built her agency from the ground up, just like I had. But she had done it a decade earlier, before the internet made virality a currency, and before words like mompreneur were even invented. Her agency, Roth Studio, specialized in branding for high-end hospitality groups and boutique hotels, an area Rise & Co. had been eyeing for expansion. She was tired, she admitted, of running the back end. "I still love the work," she said, sipping her whiskey sour. "But the growth, the hiring, HR, the structure, I'm done. I want to make again, not manage." I nodded. I knew that exhaustion. I'd seen it in the mirror before Leo started sleeping through the night. And that's how it started. An idea over drinks, becoming the next massive move. Within 3 weeks, I flew to Austin, met her team, reviewed the books, and ran a cultural alignment audit. I didn't just want to buy a company. I wanted to bring in a vision that fit ours like a second skin. The numbers worked, but more importantly, the people worked. On April 1st, 1 year and 2 weeks after the day I was fired, Rise & Co. acquired Roth Studio. Quietly. No press release. Just a line in our email signature. Now with a creative home in Austin. That same month, Nixon & Ward quietly announced a strategic pivot. They were scaling back their brand strategy arm and dissolving 2 departments, one of which was the exact one I used to run. Paul? Still nowhere to be seen. I heard he was trying to pitch a book. Title rumor, Unshakable Vision. I didn't laugh much. But with growth came new challenges. I was no longer just a founder. I was a CEO managing 28 people across 2 cities, overseeing millions in client projects, while still trying to read bedtime stories to a 1-year-old who only fell asleep when I sang "You Are My Sunshine" off-key. Balance? That was cute. I lived in cycles. 6 a.m. bottles and investor calls. 9 a.m. strategy stand-ups while pumping milk. Noon meetings, 3 p.m. diaper blowouts, 7 p.m. client dinners, and 11 p.m. Slack messages that always began with, "Sorry to ping so late." Some nights I collapsed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd overreached. If this whole thing was just a bubble waiting to pop. And then Leo would laugh at something completely dumb, like the way I said broccoli, and I'd remember exactly why I was doing it. Because I had promised myself and him that no one would ever get to decide my value again. One night around midnight, I got a message from Alyssa, my OG designer and now creative director. We got shortlisted for the Athena Campaign Awards, Val & Spirit spot, top 3. Just wanted you to see it before tomorrow. I blinked, sat up, reread it 3 times. Athena, the award I'd spent 3 years chasing back at Nixon & Ward. The one Paul promised I'd never be ready for. He had submitted his own campaigns 4 years in a row and never made the shortlist. Now, my team was on that list, and this time, my name was on the submission. At the ceremony in Chicago, I wore a blood-red sheath dress, hair slicked back, no jewelry except for a thin bracelet Leo had chewed through the week before. I didn't need sparkle. The glow came from something else. When they called Rise & Co., Val & Spirits, Age on Your Terms as the winner, I stood still for a second, long enough for Alyssa to grab my arm. "You gonna let me go up there alone?" I smiled. Never. We walked to the stage, hearts pounding. I took the mic, looked out at a room filled with people who once dismissed me, written me off, minimized my voice. I kept it short. This award isn't just for a campaign. It's for every woman who's ever been told she's a risk. Because we are a risk. To the systems that underestimated us. Applause. Standing ovation. Backstage, I opened my phone. One unread message. Paul Nixon. "Congrats, you've built something serious. I mean that." I stared at the screen. Then hit delete. Let the silence speak for me. A week later, I brought the trophy home, set it on the mantel. Leo reached for it immediately, drooled all over the base, and knocked it off. It didn't shatter. Neither did I. We celebrated 1 year of Rise & Co. in the most unglamorous way. Pizza on the floor of the office, everyone in pajamas, Leo in a party hat he kept trying to eat. I looked around at this team I'd built from nothing, this tribe of misfits and mothers, artists and strategists, queer creatives, burned-out agency escapees, and brilliant weirdos. And I said only one thing. We are the ones they didn't see coming. Let's make sure they never stop seeing us now. And we toasted. Not to revenge, to visibility, to permanence. to legacy.
By the time we crossed the 18-month mark, Rise & Co. wasn't just surviving. We were setting the standard. We had opened a third office in Atlanta, launched a podcast that broke into Spotify's top 10 under business and leadership, and were preparing our first international campaign for a boutique hotel chain expanding to the UK. I had just returned from a site visit in Edinburgh, exhausted, jet-lagged, and still half-smelling like airplane peanuts, when I walked into the office and saw Leo running toward me in socks and no pants. "Mama!" he squealed. Yes, we had a daycare corner. Yes, there were toys next to whiteboards. And yes, it worked. Because unlike every agency I had ever worked at, we built this company around life, not against it. Later that afternoon, I sat with my operations director, Gianna, reviewing upcoming contracts. She paused when she reached the next file. "You're going to want to see this one in person," she said, sliding it across the table. The logo, stamped on the first page, Lystra Group, a luxury hospitality brand headquartered in New York. Huge budget, global reach. Historically, handled by Nixon and Ward. I blinked. I didn't flinch. I smiled like the CEO I now was and extended a hand. "Paul, what a surprise." He stood awkwardly, shook my hand. "Madison, long time." We both sat. The Lystra team jumped in immediately. They explained their plan to reposition the brand globally, modernize their voice, and connect with a younger audience. They'd reviewed pitches from 5 agencies, including Nixon and Ward. But then the VP of Marketing turned to me. "We're offering you the full scope," she said. "We've seen what you've done. Frankly, it's time for a different voice. One with teeth." I kept my expression neutral. "And Paul?" She smiled politely. "We appreciate their history, but our future needs more than legacy." Paul nodded once, the barest flicker of something crossing his face. Was it regret? Acceptance? He didn't argue, didn't push. He just said, "You're the best person for the job." It wasn't a compliment. It was an epitaph. Outside the building, he followed me onto the sidewalk. "Can I buy you coffee?" he asked. I paused. "Why?" He looked down, then back at me. "Because I did a lot of things wrong, and I think you winning might be the best thing I ever did for the industry, even if I didn't mean to." I studied him. The man who had once decided my worth based on the inconvenience of my womb. The one who had watched me pour myself into his clients, then tossed me out like clutter during spring cleaning. And now here he was, humbled, shrinking in the shadow of a woman he tried to erase. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stepped into the waiting car and left him standing on the curb, holding his own silence. When I got back to Dallas, Leo ran into my arms with a squishy sippy cup and a banana sticker on his forehead. Alyssa hugged me from the side and yelled, "So, did we just steal a $5 million account from the man who once called you a soft asset?" I nodded. "Steal is the wrong word," I said. "We earned it, loudly." Weeks later, at our company-wide retreat, I stood before a room of 42 employees. Creatives, parents, interns, veterans, dreamers. Each of them here not just because they wanted a job, but because they believed in a workplace that didn't demand we bleed quietly to stay employed. I clicked the remote. Behind me, the first slide flashed. Rise & Co. FY revenue, $13.8 million. Gasps, cheers, champagne corks. But I wasn't done. Next slide. Projected headcount, 60 plus. New paid parental leave policy, 5 months minimum. Childcare stipend expanded across all regions. A hand shot up in the back. "Naomi,
now promoted to junior strategist. Is this real? She asked, half laughing, half crying. As real as the bullshit they used to tell us wasn't possible, I said. That night, as I walked into the nursery to check on Leo, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The hum of his white noise machine, his soft breathing, the glow of a stuffed turtle that pulsed gently with light. I thought about the Madison who sat in her car a year and a half ago, clutching a cardboard box, her face still red from the HR meeting that had stripped her of a job, but not her resolve. She didn't know what would come next, but I do now. Because the story they tried to write for me ended with a polite exit and an even politer apology. A whisper. A fade out. But I chose something else. I chose to rise and make sure they heard me coming. By the time we crossed the 18-month mark, Rise & Co. wasn't just surviving. We were setting the standard. We had opened a third office in Atlanta, launched a podcast that broke into Spotify's top 10 under business and leadership, and were preparing our first international campaign for a boutique hotel chain expanding to the UK. I had just returned from a site visit in Edinburgh, exhausted, jet-lagged, and still half-smelling like airplane peanuts, when I walked into the office and saw Leo running toward me in socks and no pants. "Mama!" he squealed. Yes, we had a daycare corner. Yes, there were toys next to whiteboards. And yes, it worked. Because unlike every agency I had ever worked at, we built this company around life, not against it. Later that afternoon, I sat with my operations director, Gianna, reviewing upcoming contracts. She paused when she reached the next file. "You're going to want to see this one in person," she said, sliding it across the table. The logo stamped on the first page? Listra Group, a luxury hospitality brand headquartered in New York. Huge budget, global reach. Historically, handled by Nixon and Ward. I blinked. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "Apparently, they reached out themselves, asked to meet with you directly, said they've been watching for a while." My heartbeat slowed. This wasn't just business. This was symbolic. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in Manhattan. I flew in the night before, stayed in a quiet boutique hotel off Madison, and tried to calm the swarm in my chest. The next morning, I slipped on a tailored gray suit and walked into Lystra's glass-paneled headquarters. Waiting in the boardroom? Their VP of marketing? Their brand director? And a man I hadn't expected to see. Paul Nixon. Older, thinner, a touch more pale, but still Paul. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I smiled like the CEO I now was and extended a hand. "Paul, what a surprise." He stood awkwardly, shook my hand. He said, "Madison, long time." We both sat. The Lister team jumped in immediately. They explained their plan to reposition the brand globally, modernize their voice, and connect with a younger audience. They'd reviewed pitches from 5 agencies, including Nixon and Ward, but then the VP turned to me. "We're offering you the full scope," she said. "We've seen what you've done. Frankly, it's time for a different voice. One with teeth." I kept my expression neutral. "And Paul?" She smiled politely. "We appreciate their history, but our future needs more than legacy." Paul nodded once, the barest flicker of something crossing his face. Was it regret? Acceptance? He didn't argue, didn't push. He just said, "You're the best person for the job." It wasn't a compliment. It was an epitaph. Outside the building, he followed me onto the sidewalk. "Can I buy you coffee?" he asked. I paused. "Why?" He looked down, then back at me. "Because I did a lot of things wrong, and I think you winning might be the best thing I ever did for the industry, even if I didn't mean to." I studied him, the man who had once decided my worth based on the inconvenience of my womb, the one who had watched me pour myself into his clients, then tossed me out like clutter during spring cleaning. And now here he was, humbled, shrinking in the shadow of a woman he tried to erase. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I just stepped into the waiting car and left him standing on the curb, holding his own silence. When I got back to Dallas, Leo ran into my arms with a squishy sippy cup and a banana sticker on his forehead. Alyssa hugged me from the side and yelled, "So, did we just steal a $5 million account from the man who once called you a soft asset?" I nodded. "Stole is the wrong word," I said. "We earned it loudly." Weeks later, at our company-wide retreat, I stood before a room full of 42 employees, creatives, parents, interns, veterans, dreamers. Each of them here not just because they wanted a job, but because they believed in a workplace that didn't demand we bleed quietly to stay employed. I clicked the remote. Behind me, the first slide flashed. Rise & Co. FY revenue, $13.8 million. Gasps, cheers, champagne corks. But I wasn't done. Next slide, projected headcount, 60 plus. New paid parental leave policy, 5 months minimum. Childcare stipend expanded across all regions. A hand shot up in the back. Naomi, now promoted to junior strategist. "Is this real?" she asked, half laughing, half crying. As real as the bullshit they used to tell us wasn't possible. That night, as I walked into the nursery to check on Leo, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The hum of his white noise machine, his soft breathing, the glow of a stuffed turtle that pulsed gently with light. I thought about the Madison who sat in her car a year and a half ago, clutching a cardboard box, her face still red from the HR meeting that had stripped her of a job, but not her resolve. She didn't know what would come next. But I do now, because the story they tried to write for me ended with a polite exit and an even politer apology. A whisper. A fade out. But I chose something else. I chose to rise and make sure they heard me coming.